Hello guys, welcome to this new Angular lecture. This is the agenda for today. We're going to look into two concepts. The first one is going to be directives and the second one is going to be pipes. And when we look at the directives, well, at the basic level, if you want to remember what directives are, this is what you could memorize. So directives teach HTML elements new tricks. And that's basically the power of Angular itself, expanding the functionality that HTML offers to you. What kind of tricks necessarily? You've been already so far trying with some, and we will see a little bit more in depth and in a practical way what directives are. First, just of course, a little bit of theory here. And in terms of classifying the directives, you can find three different kinds. And the first one is the one you've been already working with, and that's components. Yes, those are directives as well. And then we have the general division of kinds of directives, the structural and the attribute directives. The structural directives have to do with whenever you manipulate the DOM, then we're talking about a structural directive. So let's say in the elements, when the DOM tree gets affected by creating new HTML elements or removing elements, then we're affecting the DOM tree. So therefore, we are talking about the structure of the DOM itself, and that's why it's called structural directives. We also have the attribute directives, and they are just busy with the appearance of certain element or the behavior of certain HTML element. So whenever you see the background changing of a specific element, then we're talking about a attribute directive. And they're called attribute directives because you will see in a moment that they are pretty much like HTML attributes, and at least in the form that it's given and written or coded, then it tends to follow that logic, and that's why it's called attribute directives. And then we have pipes, and that's very simple and very straightforward. Whenever we want to transform the data that visually in a visual aspect, we could make use of pipes. There are some Angular built-in pipes that like the ones explained here, or the ones stated here, better said. And for example, at the moment that you want to format dates, format the currency, then you can go ahead and look for the right pipe, Angular pipe, and use that in that specific way that you wish. For the use of a pipe, you might want, of course, to first consult the API and see what parameters can you pass. Sometimes it's a string, sometimes a function, sometimes it could be a simple expression or a value directly, but that depends on how the pipe actually works. So I'll leave, as usual, the bibliography in which you can directly find a little bit more literature in regarding these pipes. Here you can find more in-depth explanations about these two topics. Well, here we have our application as previously shown, the previous Angular lecture. And to quickly refresh, a simple tour of the Heroes tutorial, but this is my own version of the Angular tutorial. You can click on a hero, you can update a hero, you can save that hero, and then you can display back the updated hero. You can also display the whole list of heroes and select any of them for updating back the name of the hero. Well, that's the basic functionality, but it would be cool to study the concepts if we approach right from the beginning. For that, we're going to start in the beginning. Here we see our history in terms of the app. We're going to just check out this revision, which is the initial commit, and this is the code. And this is basically the skeletal app that we all started with. But our space, what you can see here is some of the folders, some of the files that we will never touch. For example, the end-to-end tests or folder. We're not going to deal with that. There is, after you install your node packages, they will be put, including Angular, they will be put right in there. Otherwise, our application will not work. And that's the reason why we installed Node.js. Our space for application, we will for coding our application, it will be within the source and then app. So in the beginning, this is given to us, and that's for a reason, right? We studied that every Angular application at least needs an application module, right? And that is this one there. In our case, the app module. And the app module, when we look quickly into it, well, it imports some necessary stuff like the browser module, and that is for, at the simplest level, it's just for infrastructure purposes, okay? So we know, we trust the module is gonna do the whole wiring. It's like a magician, right? It's a very good manager to put all the things together and make it work, whatever we code, and keep it in a nice way, so it just works. Since this is a module, of course, the decoration that we use is ng module, and then we tell a little bit more about this specific class, which is the app module. You can see that it's that this is empty, and here in the metadata we just have the declarations, imports, and the provided. We'll talk about that in our next lecture. And the bootstrap, as I told you, every Angular application, an Angular module defines at least or contains at least one component, and that is also the root component. Remember the hierarchical view in terms of components that Angular uses, and that is our root component in this case, called app component, and that's what you see here, the bootstrap. The very in the very beginning, we need the bootstrap code, and it's to be found in there, since this is our first component. Well, that being said, let's look into our component, and you will see that here, app component, app component, app component. Every component, since defines a view, has a template attached to it, and a template, it has to deal with also the presentation layer. So you will see the CSS file for a component, the HTML file for a component. This is just for testing purposes. We're not going to touch this since it's outside the scope of Angular. And then we have where the logic goes, the app component.ts, stands for TypeScript. Well, when we do open the app components, app component, well, we are ready to create. This is part of the skeletal application, but whenever you create a component, you will see, especially if you generate automatically your components, you will see a folder in here within in the same space. So a folder for component to group all these files together, so your application is more maintainable, of course. Well, as you can see in the component, we just have a property, title, and then we assign a value, which is DOH. And that title is basically exposed or make it visible into in the template for that component, which is through interpolation, we're using that property, displaying that property, or binding to that property, better said. This is how the application looks in the beginning. Of course, this might be totally different from your skeletal application, since you're using a newer version. This is an older version, but doesn't matter. The concepts are still the same. So that has been the initial commit. Let's move on to the next issue that was solved here, and it says component here is created via the CLI. And to our decided hero name and hero power. So this is a little bit of magic, a little bit of code already. So let's check out this revision, and voila. The heroes component now, just for the sake of simplicity, let's close all, and let's start over here. Using the command, the CLI command generate component, this has appeared, this set of files, and I have my component, heroes component, logic in this file. I have my presentation, code on this HTML or the template file, if you like, over here, and a little bit of design for this specific component. I have on purposely not implemented any design until it is until it is required to understand some concepts. So that's not my intention. So that's what you see, a poorly designed website or web application. So let's have a look into what's going on in here. I already upgraded from one component. Well, first of all, this is a totally new component, better said. If I say totally new component, remember that you need to declare this component to be actually used in a module. So since I only have one module over here, well, that's where you declare the components. So as I'm using I'm creating components, I will be declaring the components over here. It's a list of declarations, if you like. So let's get back to the components. All I see is a hero name and a hero power. So this is not even an object, and a constructor as well for this specific component. And as I said, it's very simple two properties. Not talking about hero classes yet, not objects being instantiated of type hero. So it's very simple, but it works. Okay. So these are the value through interpolation, being bound to those component properties, as you can see here in the simple one-way data binding from component to the template, the presentation and layer. That's one-way data binding. Now, of course, this is not the right way of coding. If I'm gonna talk about many heroes, and that would be cooler if I just put them wrapping them into an array and I have every element as an object, right? So I can do better things in a more efficient way. So that's in our next next revision here, the hero class created and using a heroes component, and also a pipe used to display the name of hero. So we're going to transform through a pipe, through the use of a pipe, what the data has been transformed. So let's first of all, let's close all this. Let's start over in our app component, and you will see that in the in our heroes component, you will see that in our heroes component we do have now something new, and that's an import. I'm importing a hero class from this specific location, and that is over here. So here we do have a class, a very simple one, and as I mentioned, we want to instantiate objects of type hero, so it keeps our code, first of all, keeps a better design. Therefore it's better. So now in the heroes component, we're making use of the class, and as we have defined here, then we are ready to just instantiate our objects. Here we're creating an object basically with these values, and of course those values need to match the signature that we have in the class. Now we're going to see in the template that we're not longer using the normal and individual properties of the component, but rather we're using this other property, hero, and accessing the members of that object. How? We can see still in the interpolation expressions that is being that's the case. So it's like it has changed: hero.id, hero.name, hero.power. Those are the members of the hero property in defining the components. Now, since we talked about pipes, here is a first use of those built-in pipes that Angular defines. It's a very, very nice feature, because then you can just transform the value that is being put into this interpolation section. Whenever you see the value or the template expression, that's a better saying. Then you can use, if you wish to transform that in terms of the format, then you can separate with a bar and use the pipe. Okay. In this case, the whole thing that we're doing here is just using the so-called uppercase pipe, and yeah, it's going to be visually you're going to see this value written in uppercase. So that's for displaying purposes, of course. Here it is the case, super missed, so it doesn't matter how it is defined at the component level. Here you see it's actually not everything in uppercase, but here it appears hero name as uppercase. That's because of the pipe. Okay, just transforming or dealing with the format of the data, and that's how you use basically pipes. Then, well, two-way data binding, we already looked into that, but just to quickly confirm what two data binding is, remember that let's get back as usual, just let's close all, let's get back to the heroes component. What do we have here? Exactly the same code as previously shown, and in the HTML, in the template, we do have our two-way binding ng model. We have just an input here, a control form for the hero name, and yeah, we will see that in action. This is the only change in this code, and you can see the pipe actually working live. Doesn't matter if I just put, let's update to ICTer, and then you will see that everything gets displayed in uppercase. That's thanks to the pipe, and you can also see two-way data binding from the component to the template, and from the template through to the component. That's the only thing happening here. Let's go forward, and here it's a little bit more interesting code happening. We are looking into a little bit more manageable code, and also we are already using directives, structural directives to be explicit in this example. So first of all, let me just close all and start in mock of heroes. Well, we still make use of the class, but we're not importing that any longer in the components. So the import hero from the hero the location, which is this one, we're not importing that anymore. But we are creating a mock heroes file, and that is simply as you can see here, creating a constant of called heroes. That is the constant, the only thing we do here. And of course, since we are using the same class hero for the same purposes, we are going to import it in here in this specific script, mock heroes. And the only thing that that we do here is basically create each object, so hard coding the heroes as objects. If you can see, the list is of type hero and is an array. We are assigning an array containing an each, and in the array we can see objects, JavaScript objects, TypeScript objects, if you like. But you know that TypeScript gets transpiled onto JavaScript. So every single line here is a hero object. That being said, we can just look into heroes component. And here, of course, we're going to import the hard-coded data, mock heroes. And the only thing that we do here is basically the same as before, but this time we are already loading and assigning into this component property called heroes, assigning the constant that we are importing from there. In other words, populating this property with a lot of heroes. Now this the type of this one is this property is an array, as you should array of heroes, as you should already know. Let's see what's happening, how we're going to present this. If it's a list of heroes, I would need a directive to iterate through that. And the power of Angular is actually allowing me to, in a very few lines of code, iterate to any number iterate through a collection of any number of items. In this case, the items are heroes, and you do that as the following. In the since we are going to manipulate first of all the DOM, every item is gonna become here an li. See that one? Every item in the hero, every hero is becoming a list item inside this another list HTML element. Then what we're dealing here is with a structural directive. And structural directives recalling from the theory that's basically responsible for the HTML layout, manipulating the DOM tree. And this is a very good example of a structural directive, the ng4. So this is what we call the template statement, and it's as follows, which is basically a TypeScript code. Here what we are doing is just declaring a variable, so-called template input variable, hero of heroes. Now, to make sense of this is basically you can say for every object hero in the array of heroes implemented or defined in the logic over here, then you're going to display the following, and the following will work for every single item in the in your array. Okay, that's it. Of course, you use interpolation to go through each members of each hero. And yeah, that's how a good example of a structural directive. Now, to see an attribute directive example, then let me just check out this revision and go to, yeah. Again, I'm still using the hard-coded mock of heroes data based on the hero class. And let's go to the app component, into the heroes component to see the logic. We have a little bit of more logic in here. This is still the same, but in this case, we have the property called selected hero, yeah, of type hero. Then we do have a function onSelect, and you will assign whatever selection you make in terms of hero to the property of this component. It's called selected hero. Okay, to make sense of this, it's basically an event binding of what's happening here. Let's have a look at the heroes component template. And here we can make sense of all this. By the way, before jumping into this is the attribute directive. But before jumping in here, let's have a look to another example of a structural directive, and this is the so-called ng-if, a structural directive. And basically, what's happening here, this template statement is evaluates if the variable selected hero is defined. And if it is, then the div itself is added to the DOM. So if this evaluates to true, some hero will appear in this specific section, which is this division. Now let me quickly show you the code up until this point. And no details of hero. No heroes are actually appearing, and I forgot this. Just semicolon there, and now it should work. Okay, now we do have the list of heroes over here, but as you can see, let me tell you, the division that we were talking about, the ng-if over here, is not appearing. Now it's false, so this division does not exist. And at the moment I click on one hero, then this division is going to be inputted in the DOM, and therefore we have this new one. Okay. That being said, let's look into the attribute directives that we talked about. Now that's also a bit interesting, since attribute directive deals with the loop, basically, or the behavior of a HTML element. So here in this example, as I already mentioned, we are binding to an event, and that is whenever we click on this specific item. Remember that my items are heroes, so this is an item, this is an item, this is an item. You can imagine that there is an ng-for here, like we previously saw it. So this is my structural directive over here, and whenever I click on that specific item, I'm passing the hero to this function, or to this method, and that's the function, the method that we define on the component. So here it is, on select, you pass a parameter and of type hero, and you just simply assign that specific hero to this specific component's property, nothing else. And then we have the attributes directive. And remember that changes the appearance of the behavior of a DOM element, and we basically use them like HTML attributes, hence the name attribute directive. This pretty much looks like an attribute directive in a square brackets. This has also a different name, class binding, but behind the scenes, what Angular is doing is basically creating a directive for us for this case. And the keyword here, class.selected.hs, refers to the style of it, selected.h in the CSS. So that's the selector referring to this specific directive. See that? So it's very similar to the class HTML attribute, but it is not an HTML attribute. Okay, we are just extending the functionality of HTML, which is precisely what directives do. It's adding a little bit of magic to your HTML elements. Yeah. So whenever you select that item, this is going to be applied background color blue violet, and that's exactly what we see in here. So I'm going to select this hero ID 7. When I click here, I call the function, and voila, it gets selected, it gets put on top, and the background changes of this one. Okay, so that is a attribute directive being used. So guys, I think that's it. In the future, we're gonna look into services, master detail. This one is not relevant for us, but we will jump into a hero service and yeah, look into first services concept, and of course later on working asynchronously, asking already the server some data, and discover the real power of a single page applications. So that has been it. See you in the next lecture.